Ryan hated working at Aldrak's 7 orbital station. The endless stream of interplanetary diplomats, the constant drone of fusion engines, and the perpetual smell of recycled air mixed with whatever exotic cuisines the station's food dispensers were attempting to recreate that day. But what 16-year-old wouldn't hate being stuck as an errand boy in a glorified space bus terminal during the 5th Galactic Era? Boy, more sanitizer for the VIP Foreign Diplomats Lounge, barked his supervisor, a four-armed Nexilian whose ability to find fault with Ryan's work was matched only by their ability to assign more of it. Right away, sir, Ryan mumbled, pushing his cleaning cart toward the service elevator. He had dreams beyond this station, perhaps joining the Galactic Scout Corps or even applying to the Interspecies Diplomatic Academy. Dreams that seemed as distant as Earth from this floating metal can. The VIP lounge was unusually quiet that day. Most of the plush recliners sat empty, their adaptive cushioning material lazily reshaping itself in anticipation of the next wealthy posterior. Ryan's eyes were drawn to a solitary figure standing in the far corner, tall, draped in a dark cloak that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hem of the garment occasionally shifted, revealing intricate dragon patterns etched in some kind of metallic nanofabric that shimmered between ancient craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology. Curious, Ryan wheeled his cart closer. The figure remained motionless, its face obscured by a deep hood. Something about the visitor's stillness made the hairs on Ryan's neck stand up. Why would someone pay for VIP lounge access just to stand in a corner like a forgotten coat rack? The answer came with explosive clarity. The service door behind them burst open, and a scarred mercenary charged in, heavy boots clanging against the polished floor. His face with a roadmap of violence. One eye replaced with a crude cybernetic implant that glowed an ominous red, tattoos of past kills creeping up his neck like parasitic vines. Most alarmingly, he brandished a plasma rifle, the kind outlawed in 17 star systems for its tendency to not just kill targets, but erase them from existence at the molecular level. Death to the scaled oppressor, the mercenary roared, weapon raised and aimed directly at the cloaked figure. What happened next occurred in the span of 3 heartbeats. In the first heartbeat, Ryan's brain registered the plasma weapon, recognizing its distinctive humming charge from security briefings all station workers were required to view. In the second heartbeat, a deeply stupid but unquestionably noble impulse seized Ryan's muscles. Without any strategic planning or self-preservation instinct whatsoever, he lunged forward. In the third heartbeat, Ryan's body inserted itself between the mysterious cloaked figure and the mercenary, just as the plasma rifle discharged. The world exploded into white-hot agony. Ryan felt the plasma bolt tear through his back, a searing violation of flesh and bone. As he collapsed, his last conscious thought was a remarkably calm assessment. That was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. His body crumpled to the floor like a marionette with severed strings. Around him, chaos erupted, shouting, running, security alarms wailing. The mercenary fled, leaving destruction in his wake. As the station's emergency medical team rushed in, the cloaked figure finally moved, kneeling beside Ryan's broken body. With one elegant motion, the stranger pulled back their hood, revealing a face that was mostly human in structure, but unmistakably not human in nature. Scales of deep sapphire mixed with emerald green, framed golden, vertical pupilled eyes. A ridge of smaller scales ran along where human eyebrows would be, and when the being spoke, teeth too sharp and numerous for any human mouth glinted. This human child has saved the Imperial Dragon, the being announced, its voice simultaneously like velvet and the rumble before an avalanche. The medical team froze momentarily, their professional training temporarily overridden by shock. They weren't just treating an injured station worker. They were working on someone who had taken a bullet for possibly the most powerful entity in the galaxy. The same entity that now stood over them, reptilian eyes tracking their every move. Somewhere in the deep darkness of his unconscious mind, Ryan drifted, blissfully unaware that he had just altered the course of galactic politics by doing something breathtakingly heroic and catastrophically uninformed. The antiseptic smell hit Ryan's nostrils first, sharp and clinical. Then came the incessant beeping, the rhythmic sound of monitoring equipment cataloging his continued existence. His eyelids felt like they'd been glued shut, but after several attempts, he managed to crack them open. He was in what appeared to be the station's premium medical facility, a place he'd only glimpsed. During his orientation tour, the standard medical bay was utilitarian, all-metal surfaces and practical equipment. This room, by contrast, featured actual wood paneling, soft lighting, and medical technology that looked several generations more advanced than anything he'd seen before. "He's awake," announced a voice, and suddenly a doctor appeared in Ryan's field of vision. A human woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Can you hear me?" she asked, shining a light into his eyes. Ryan tried to nod, but found his neck strangely unresponsive. "Yes," he croaked instead, his voice rough from disuse. "What happened?" The doctor's expression shifted subtly, that professional mask of compassion that medical practitioners develop when delivering bad news. "You were shot with a plasma weapon. The energy discharge severely damaged your spinal cord." Ryan waited for more, some explanation of what would happen next, or how long he'd need to recover. When the doctor remained silent, a cold understanding began to seep into his consciousness. "I can't feel my legs," he stated, the words emerging flat and hollow. "Or your arms, I'm afraid," the doctor added gently. "The damage is extensive. You're quadriplegic, paralyzed from the neck down." The words crashed over Ryan like a wave of icy water. He tried to process what this meant, but his mind kept circling back to a single, devastating realization. He would never walk again, never use his hands, never be independent. "This can't be happening," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "There must be some treatment, some technology." "Human medical science has advanced significantly," the doctor interrupted, her tone carefully measured, "but some injuries remain beyond our capabilities to fully reverse." Before Ryan could respond, the door to his room slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. The medical staff immediately straightened, their postures shifting from professional to deferential. Through his tears, Ryan saw a tall, elegant figure enter, the same cloaked individual from the VIP lounge, but now with hood removed. Up close, the being's draconic features were even more pronounced. What Ryan had initially taken for unusual makeup or cosmetic modifications were clearly natural characteristics. Scales that seemed to shimmer with an internal light, eyes with vertical pupils that contracted slightly in the room's brightness, and a subtle ridge along the crown of their head that suggested a dormant crest. "Grand Magister Dragon," the doctor said, bowing slightly. "The patient has regained consciousness, as you can see." The dragon approached Ryan's bed, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for a being of such height. "Leave us," he commanded, and the medical staff promptly exited, the door sliding shut behind them. For a moment, the dragon simply studied Ryan, those alien eyes unblinking. Then, to Ryan's surprise, the being pulled up a chair and sat. "You sacrificed yourself for a stranger," the dragon said, his voice carrying that same dual quality Ryan had heard before losing consciousness. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Why?" Ryan swallowed. "I saw someone about to be attacked. I just reacted, without knowing who or what I was." "Yes." The dragon's expression remained unreadable. "I am the Imperial Dragon, one of the oldest living entities in this galaxy and representative of the Dragon Imperium to the Planetary Alliance. The being you so thoughtlessly saved is considered by many to be the most powerful diplomatic voice in galactic politics." Ryan blinked, trying to process this information. His knowledge of galactic politics was limited to what he'd gleaned from public news terminals and mandatory civics education. The Dragon Imperium was ancient and powerful, their technology and lifespan making humans seem like mayflies in comparison. "I didn't know," Ryan admitted, then added with a hint of gallows humor. "Would it have changed anything if I had?" For the first time, The dragon's expression shifted, something almost like amusement flickering across those alien features. Perhaps not. Your action speaks to an impulsive nobility that my kind finds simultaneously primitive and fascinating. The dragon leaned forward slightly. I owe you a life debt, young human. Tell me what you desire as compensation. The question momentarily stunned Ryan. What could he possibly ask for from one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy? Credits? Education? A way off this station? But as the reality of his condition reasserted itself, the answer became painfully clear. I want to walk again, Ryan said, his voice cracking. I want my body back. The dragon was silent for a long moment, those golden eyes studying Ryan with an intensity that seemed to peer into his very soul. Your spinal cord is severely damaged. Human medicine, advanced as it is, has limits. Ryan's hope began to crumble, but then the dragon continued. However, there are other solutions, riskier ones. What kind of solutions? A procedure we call dragonic neural graft. It combines dragon cellular technology with human neural interfaces. The dragon's voice lowered. It has rarely been attempted on humans, and never for injuries as extensive as yours. The procedure would require special permission from the dragon court. Would it work? Ryan asked, new hope flaring in his chest. Possibly, but there would be side effects, changes. Before Ryan could ask for clarification, the door slid open again. This time, a group of official-looking humans in the distinctive midnight blue uniforms of the Interplanetary Embassy strode in, led by a stern-faced woman with captain's insignia. Imperial Dragon, she said with a formal bow. I apologize for the interruption, but we must debrief the witness about the assassination attempt. The dragon rose, towering over the embassy officials. This boy has suffered a life-altering injury in my defense. Your questions can wait until he has had adequate time to recover. With respect, Grand Magister, the captain replied, her tone suggesting limited patience for draconic protocols. This incident has galactic security implications. Aldrax, 7 has become a diplomatic hotspot, and all evidence suggests this was a coordinated attempt on your life. As they argued, Ryan became aware of a commotion outside his room. The muffled sounds of many voices and the distinctive electronic hum of media recording equipment. Somehow, in the mere hours he'd been unconscious, he had become newsworthy. The boy stays under my protection, the dragon declared finally, ending the debate. You may submit written questions through proper diplomatic channels. After the embassy officials reluctantly departed, the dragon turned back to Ryan. Rest now. We will speak of a neural graft again once you've had time to consider the implications. As the dragon left, Ryan lay in the silence of his room, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed him. The initial shock was giving way to crushing despair. He had only wanted to help someone, a reflexive act of decency, and now his entire life had been upended. Outside his room, the galaxy's media frenzy was just beginning to build, spinning tales of the nameless human hero who had saved the Imperial Dragon. Inside, that same hero stared at the ceiling, wondering if any heroic act could be worth the cost he now paid. The next few days passed in a blur of medical examinations, unwanted media attention, and growing political tension. Ryan found himself at the center of a diplomatic storm he barely understood, unable even to scratch his own nose as dignitaries and security personnel argued over his hospital bed. Ryan's room in the medical center had become an unlikely nexus of galactic intrigue. Security protocols had been heightened to an almost comical degree. Retinal scanners, voice recognition, and armed guards posted outside his door. For someone who had spent his life being overlooked, the attention was simultaneously flattering and suffocating. They're saying you're the key to interspecies relations now, commented his nurse, a cheerful proximan with opalescent skin who had been reading news headlines to him. Not bad for a station errand boy. Ryan managed a weak smile. The brief thrill of notoriety had quickly faded, replaced by the grinding reality of his condition. Every moment was a reminder of what he had lost. The need to be fed, cleaned, repositioned in bed, all dignity stripped away by necessity. Any news about the shooter? Ryan asked, changing the subject. The authorities identified him as a member of the Draconic Reformers, radical anti-imperialists who want to overthrow the Dragon Court. They've been causing trouble for decades, but this is their boldest move yet. Before Ryan could respond, alarms blared throughout the medical center. His nurse hurried to the door, peering out cautiously. "Security lockdown," she reported. "Someone's trying to breach the perimeter." Moments later, the door slid open, admitting a tall, imposing woman in a station security uniform adorned with commander insignia. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and a jagged scar ran across her left cheekbone, giving her face a perpetually asymmetrical expression. "Commander Illicitaire," she introduced herself crisply. "Head of Aldrax, 7 Security. I need to speak with the patient alone." Once the nurse had reluctantly departed, Commander Terre pulled up a chair and sat beside Ryan's bed, studying him with calculating eyes. "Let's cut through the diplomatic garbage," she said. "You're in a uniquely valuable position, Ryan. You've earned the Imperial Dragon's trust, something few humans have ever managed. That makes you an asset." "I'm not much of an asset like this," Ryan replied bitterly, nodding toward his immobile body. Something like genuine sympathy flickered across Terre's heart. "Features. I understand your situation is difficult, which is why I'm prepared to offer you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Help us identify the mastermind behind the assassination attempt. The shooter was just a pawn. We need to know who's really pulling the strings within the Draconic Reformers. In exchange, I'll personally ensure you receive priority access to the station's rehabilitation fund. The best prosthetics, neural interfaces, adaptive equipment, whatever it takes to give you back some independence." The offer was tempting, but Ryan hesitated. The Imperial Dragon mentioned something called a Dragonic neurograft. Terre's eyes widened slightly. "That's not public knowledge. Dragons guard their biotechnology jealously. He offered it to me, said it might help me walk again." The commander leaned back, reassessing the situation. "Dragon medical technology is centuries beyond ours. If the Imperial Dragon offered you this, it's an unprecedented honor." She paused. "It's also potentially dangerous. Dragon biology doesn't always mesh well with human systems." Before Ryan could respond, the facility's alarms sounded again, this time with greater urgency. Commander Terre rose swiftly, hand moving to her sidearm. "We'll continue this discussion later," she said, striding toward the door. "Think about my offer." As the day progressed, Ryan's room became increasingly crowded with visitors, medical specialists, security personnel, and finally, a delegation from the Dragon Imperium itself. The Dragon representatives maintained a semi-human form that still prominently displayed their draconic heritage. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with scaled skin in various metallic hues, elongated faces with pronounced ridges, and eyes that gleamed with ancient intelligence. Their formal robes shimmered with embedded technology so advanced it appeared magical. Watching humans interact with the Dragon delegation was almost comical. Station officials alternated between excessive bowing and nervous stammering, while the Dragons maintained an air of patient superiority, like adults tolerating enthusiastic children. The lead Dragon, whose scales gleamed a burnished copper, approached Ryan's bed. "I am Elder Verizith of the Imperial Court," he announced, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate the air. "We have come to evaluate your worthiness for the neurograft." The Imperial Dragon stood slightly apart, observing. When Ryan glanced his way, the dragon gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "Worthiness?" Ryan questioned. "I thought this was a medical procedure." Elder Verizith's expression hardened. "The neurograft involves the transference of sacred dragon genetic material. We do not share our essence lightly, human child." Another dragon, this one with silvery scales that caught the light like polished mirrors, leaned forward. "The procedure has been attempted only 17 times in the last millennium. 11 recipients died. 3 became something neither human nor dragon. Only 3 achieved full recovery, and even they experienced significant changes." "What kind of changes?" Ryan asked. "Physical adaptations, mental alterations, A connection to draconic essence that cannot be severed, the silver dragon explained. You would not be fully human afterward. The room fell silent as Ryan absorbed this information. It was a gamble with incredibly high stakes, his humanity against his mobility. The boy risked his life for me without hesitation or expectation of reward. The Imperial Dragon finally spoke. Such nobility deserves recognition. I stand as his advocate before the court. The dragons exchanged glances, communicating in some subtle way Ryan couldn't interpret. Finally, Elder Verizeth nodded. We will consider your case, human child, but you must swear to never reveal the secrets of our technology, regardless of the outcome. As the dragon delegation prepared to leave, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside. The door burst open, and a team of armed individuals in unmarked black combat suits swarmed into the room. Their faces were covered by opaque visors, but their equipment bore the subtle insignia of Corp Syndicate, one of the largest private military companies in the galaxy. "Nobody move," shouted their leader, weapon raised. "We're taking the boy. This is a diplomatic violation." Elder Verizeth roared, his human form rippling as draconic features became more pronounced in anger. The Corp Syndicate team ignored him, moving with practiced efficiency. Two operatives secured Ryan, disconnecting him from the medical equipment and strapping him to a hover chair. The terrifying sensation of being completely helpless, unable to resist in any way, sent waves of panic through Ryan's body. The neurograph technology is worth trillions on the black market, the leader explained coldly. And this boy is our ticket to it. They began retreating toward the door, using Ryan as a shield. The dragons and station security, including Commander Tear, who had rushed to the scene, stood frozen, unwilling to risk his life. As they moved through the medical facilities corridors, Ryan strapped helplessly to the hover chair. The absurdity of his situation wasn't lost on him. His terror was genuine, but there was also something darkly comedic about being kidnapped while completely paralyzed, like being the world's most passive participant in his own abduction. The Corp Syndicate team hustled him through service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares. Ryan's hover chair bobbed erratically as they moved, occasionally bumping into walls in their haste. "Could you maybe drive this thing better?" Ryan found himself saying, hysteria making him recklessly sarcastic. "If you're going to kidnap me, at least don't give me motion sickness." The leader shot him a glare through his visor. "Quiet. You should be grateful we're keeping you alive." "Grateful? For what? Being paralyzed and then kidnapped? My standards for gratitude are a bit higher than that." They reached a maintenance airlock, presumably where their escape vessel was docked. As the leader input the override codes, a tremendous roar echoed through the corridor, a sound so primal and powerful that the very walls seemed to vibrate. The Imperial Dragon had abandoned his humanoid form. In the confined space of the station corridor stood a true dragon, at least 15 feet long from snout to tail tip, scales gleaming like polished sapphires, eyes blazing with golden fire. His wings were partially folded in the tight space, but still impressive, ribbed with what looked like living metal. The Corp Syndicate team opened fire, their energy weapons sizzling against the dragon's scales with minimal effect. The Imperial Dragon responded by exhaling a concentrated stream of what appeared to be blue-white plasma, so hot it instantly melted through the reinforced metal airlock door. The mercenaries scattered, but the dragon moved with shocking speed for something so large. Claws like polished daggers shredded combat armor, as if it were tissue paper. The leader raised his weapon, aiming not at the dragon, but at Ryan. "Stop, or I'll kill him." The Imperial Dragon froze, those intense golden eyes shifting between the mercenary and Ryan. Then, with a movement almost too fast to follow, his tail whipped forward, slicing the weapon in half before it could discharge. In moments, it was over. The Corp Syndicate team lay unconscious or restrained, and the Imperial Dragon stood over Ryan, gradually shifting back to his more humanoid form. "Are you injured?" the dragon asked, his voice still carrying echoes of that thunderous roar. "No more than I already was," Ryan replied, his heart still racing from the encounter. For the first time, he truly understood what the Imperial Dragon was. Not just a diplomat in unusual clothing, but a being of devastating power who had chosen restraint. Commander Tear arrived with a security team, surveying the destruction with a low whistle. "Well, that complicates things." "How so?" the dragon inquired. "Corp Syndicate doesn't make moves like this without serious backing. This wasn't just about black market technology. Someone wants to disrupt dragon-human relations badly enough to risk open conflict." The dragon nodded grimly. "The draconic reformers have grown bolder than I realized. If they've allied with Corp Syndicate, we face a more organized threat than anticipated." Ryan listened to their strategic discussion, feeling increasingly like a pawn in a game played on a board he couldn't even see. Yet as he watched the Imperial Dragon, now calmly discussing security protocols while standing in a corridor half melted by his breath weapon, Ryan found his resolve hardening. "I want to do it," he announced, interrupting their conversation. "The neural graft. I want to try." The dragon turned those golden eyes on him, studying him intently. "You understand that if you accept this procedure, you become a target for everyone who wants our technology. Your life will never be the same." Ryan's laugh held no humor. "Look at me. My life is already never going to be the same. At least this way, I might have a life worth living." He took a deep breath. "I want to stand on my own feet again, whatever the cost." The Imperial Dragon nodded solemnly. "Then we will prepare for your journey to the Dragon's Sanctum." The journey to the Dragon's Sanctum took 3 days aboard the Imperial Dragon's personal vessel, a sleek craft that seemed to bend the laws of physics as casually as it navigated the star lanes. Ryan, secured in a specially designed medical pod, spent most of the journey drifting in and out of consciousness as the ship's automated systems administered preparatory treatments to his broken body. When he was awake, Ryan watched the stars streak by through a viewing portal positioned above his pod. The Imperial Dragon occasionally visited, explaining aspects of the upcoming procedure or simply sitting in contemplative silence. "Where exactly are we going?" Ryan asked during one such visit. "The Dragon's Sanctum exists in a fold of reality within an asteroid field on the edge of the Myriad system," the dragon replied. "It is both a place and a state of being, ancient even by our standards." "That sounds mystical." A smile flickered across the dragon's scaled features. "The line between advanced science and mysticism is often merely a matter of understanding. What your ancestors would call magic, you call technology. What you call technology, we sometimes call primitive approximation." The ship eventually decelerated, and through his portal, Ryan saw they had entered a dense asteroid field. The craft wove between massive space rocks with impossible precision. Then, suddenly, reality seemed to fold. There was no other way to describe it. The starfield distorted, stretching and compressing simultaneously, and then they were elsewhere. A massive structure floated before them, seemingly carved from a single asteroid, but glowing with veins of luminescent material that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its architecture defied human aesthetic, all sweeping curves and asymmetrical spires that somehow achieved perfect balance. "The Sanctum," the Imperial Dragon announced simply. The landing process and Ryan's transfer into the facility passed in a blur. The interior of the Sanctum was even more disorienting than its exterior, spaces that seemed simultaneously vast and intimate, lighting that shifted in response to thought rather than physical controls, and surfaces that appeared solid until approached, then revealed themselves to be semi-permeable energy fields. Dragon attendants moved around him, their forms shifting fluidly between humanoid and more draconic appearances as the situation required. They spoke a language that sounded like melodic thunder, occasionally switching to standard when addressing Ryan directly. "We must prepare your body for the cellular integration," explained one attendant, a female dragon with scales the color of polished jade. "The process requires both technological intervention and ritual preparation." Ryan was taken to a circular chamber whose walls seemed to be made of liquid crystal. In the center stood a platform surrounded by equipment that somehow managed to look both ancient and futuristic. stone basins inscribed with glowing runes alongside floating holographic displays and precision medical instruments. The neural graft uses stem cells from the Imperial lineage. The Jade Dragon continued, monitoring Ryan's vital signs. These cells have unusual properties. They can adapt to host biology while maintaining their original programming. We will introduce them to your damaged spinal tissue, where they will both repair and enhance neural pathways. Will it hurt? Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. You'll be unconscious for the primary procedure, she assured him. But the integration period afterward, yes, there will be discomfort as your body adapts. What followed was an elaborate preparation ritual that blended cutting-edge science with what appeared to be ceremonial practices. Ryan was bathed in solutions that changed color as they touched his skin, injected with nano-stabilizers that made his veins glow momentarily, and surrounded by dragon attendants who chanted in harmonized tones that seemed to resonate with the very walls of the chamber. The Imperial Dragon himself arrived for the final phase, carrying a small crystalline vial containing a swirling golden liquid. These cells are from my own lineage, he explained, his voice solemn. They represent an unbroken genetic line stretching back to the birth of stars. With them comes great responsibility. As the anesthetic began to take effect, Ryan heard the dragons begin a new chant, the sounds washing over him like waves. His last conscious thought was a mixture of hope and fear, hope that he might walk again, and fear of what else he might become in the process. Dreams came to Ryan as he floated in the twilight between consciousness and oblivion. Strange dreams of flying through star-filled skies with wings he could feel but not see, of ancient memories that weren't his own, of fire that burned within rather than without. Throughout it all, voices murmured in that thunderous dragon language, occasionally slipping into fragments he could understand. Neural pathways reforming. Genetic drift within acceptable parameters. Consciousness patterns stable, but evolving. He had no sense of time passing. It could have been hours or days or weeks. Eventually, the voices grew more urgent, the peaceful dreamscape disrupted by what sounded like alarms. Breach in the outer sanctum. Draconic reformers have found us. Protect the integration chamber at all costs. Ryan struggled toward consciousness, fighting through layers of anesthetic fog. His eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but he managed to force them open. The crystal chamber was bathed in pulsing red light. Dragon attendants moved with purposeful haste, securing equipment and monitoring his status. He's waking, announced the Jade Dragon. Too soon. The neural pathways haven't fully stabilized. We have no choice, replied another voice, the Imperial Dragon. The reformers have breached the secondary defenses. If they interrupt the procedure now, he'll die. And if we accelerate it, he may still die, or worse. I've seen his spirit. He will endure. Through his half-opened eyes, Ryan saw the Imperial Dragon place a scaled hand on his forehead. A wave of warmth spread through his body, and suddenly the numbness that had been his constant companion since the shooting began to recede. First came sensation, a tingling that started at his neck and traveled downward, like static electricity dancing along dormant nerve pathways. Then, astonishingly, movement. Ryan focused all his concentration and watched in wonder as his right index finger twitched slightly. The moment of triumph was short-lived. Alarms blared louder, and the chamber door burst open. The Imperial Dragon spun to face the intruders, a group of dragons and humans in matching gray combat suits, bearing the emblem of a broken crown. The reformers, growled the Imperial Dragon, his form already shifting toward his more battle-ready draconic state. Stand aside, Imperial, commanded their leader, a dragon with obsidian scales. We've come for the human. This abomination cannot be allowed to exist. A human with dragon essence violates all natural law. Natural law? The Imperial Dragon's laugh was like distant thunder. Our people have been shaping natural law since before humans discovered fire. Fighting erupted in the chamber. The Imperial Dragon launched himself at the intruders, his partially transformed body a blur of scales and claws. The medical attendants scrambled to protect Ryan, moving his platform toward a shielded alcove. In the chaos, Ryan felt something extraordinary happening to his body. The tingling had intensified to a burning sensation that spread through his limbs. His skin felt too tight, too hot, and somewhere deep in his chest, an unfamiliar pressure was building. When a stray energy bolt struck one of the attendants protecting him, Ryan reacted instinctively. He sat upright, a movement that should have been impossible days ago, and reached toward the fallen dragon. As he did, he noticed with shock that his arms were covered in a fine pattern of scales, barely visible but catching the light like microscopic prisms. "He's mobile," shouted one of the reformers, turning his weapon toward Ryan. The pressure in Ryan's chest exploded outward. He opened his mouth to shout a warning and instead released a small jet of flame. Not the devastating plasma breath of a full dragon, but certainly not something any human should be capable of producing. The reformer stumbled backward in surprise, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. The Imperial Dragon used the distraction to overpower the remaining intruders, binding them with restraints that seemed to materialize from his very scales. When the fighting ended, all eyes turned to Ryan, who sat on the platform, staring at his scaled arms in shock and wonder. "It appears the integration was more comprehensive than anticipated," the J-Dragon observed, scanning him with a handheld device. His body accepted the draconic cells with unusual receptivity. Can I walk?" Ryan asked, his voice hoarse. "Carefully," the Imperial Dragon cautioned. "Your neural pathways are still stabilizing." With trembling arms, Ryan pushed himself to the edge of the platform. He lowered his feet to the floor, feet that now moved at his command, and slowly, uncertainly, stood upright. His legs shook with the effort, but they held his weight. After weeks of paralysis, the simple act of standing felt like a miracle. "I'm standing," he whispered, tears flowing freely down his cheeks. "I'm actually standing." The Imperial Dragon approached, placing a steadying hand on Ryan's shoulder. "At great cost, perhaps. The changes to your physiology appear more extensive than we planned." "What am I now?" Ryan asked, noticing that his tears were leaving faint steam marks where they fell. "Something new," the dragon replied simply. "Something between." As the medical team continued to monitor Ryan's recovery, he discovered the extent of his transformation. The scales, barely noticeable at first, had spread in delicate patterns across his shoulders and spine. His body temperature ran several degrees hotter than human normal. Most strikingly, his eyes had developed vertical pupils that contracted to slits in bright light. During his exploration of the sanctum, initially wobbly walks that gradually became more confident strides, Ryan discovered an ancient archive of holographic records. With the Imperial Dragon's permission, he began studying the history of dragon-human relations and previous attempts at neural grafting. Most of these ended badly, Ryan observed, gesturing at case files of previous graft recipients. 3 became unstable hybrids according to these records. Their minds couldn't reconcile the draconic consciousness with their human identity, the Imperial Dragon explained. The neural pathways formed, but the psychological integration failed. "And you risked the same happening to me?" The dragon's expression was unreadable. "I believe your spirit's strong enough to endure where others failed. You proved that when you threw yourself between me and the assassin without hesitation." "What about the draconic reformers? Why do they want me dead?" The Imperial Dragon's eyes narrowed. Their rhetoric claims they seek reform, but their true aim is revolution. They believe the Dragon Imperium has grown too conservative, too removed from the rest of galactic society. In their view, our technology should be freely shared among all species. "That doesn't sound entirely unreasonable," Ryan noted, earning a sharp look from the dragon. "In principle, perhaps, but technology without wisdom leads to devastation. We've witnessed countless civilizations destroy themselves by advancing too quickly." The dragon gestured to the captive reformers, "and they're willing to kill to achieve their aims. That's not reform, it's terrorism." As Ryan continued his recovery, he discovered more about the dragon's sanctum and the Imperial Dragon himself. The archives revealed that despite his fearsome reputation, the Imperial Dragon had often served as a moderating influence within the Dragon Court, advocating for measured cooperation with younger species. "You're not what I expected," Ryan admitted during one of their conversations. "The way humans talk about dragons, I thought you'd be more tyrannical, arrogant, prone to hoarding treasure in mountain caves." The dragon's mouth curved in what Ryan now recognized as amusement. "Something like that. Your species has always had a talent for dramatic storytelling." The dragon's expression grew more serious. "Though I must admit, some of my kind do little to discourage those stereotypes." One morning, as Ryan practiced controlling his newly discovered flame breath, still little more than a hot flash of sparks, alarms blared throughout the sanctum once again. "They've returned," the Jade Dragon announced, rushing into the training chamber. "Multiple ships, heavily armed. It's not just the reformers this time. They've brought Corp Syndicate forces with them." The Imperial Dragon's eyes gleamed with determination. "We must return to Aldrax 7 immediately. This conflict has grown beyond a simple assassination attempt." "What about me?" Ryan asked. "You're coming with us," the dragon replied. "Like it or not, you've become symbolic in this struggle. A human with dragon essence represents exactly what the reformers claim to fear, the blurring of boundaries between our kinds." Within hours, they were aboard the Imperial vessel, racing back toward Aldrax 7 station. The Imperial Dragon spent the journey in communication with both the Dragon Court and human diplomatic channels, arranging for an emergency summit. "The situation has escalated," he explained to Ryan. "The alliance between the Reformers and Corp Syndicate has created a dangerous political powder keg. We must defuse it before open warfare erupts." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a victim of circumstance, but a living symbol in a conflict that could affect billions. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. The dragon studied him thoughtfully. "Be exactly what you are, living proof that humans and dragons can share more than just diplomatic relations. Your very existence challenges the narrative that our species must remain forever separate." When they arrived at Aldrax 7, the station was in a state of high alert. Security forces were everywhere, and tension hung in the recycled air like a storm about to break. The central diplomatic hall had been prepared for the emergency summit, with representatives from the Dragon Court, human governments, and even reluctant emissaries from the reformers who had agreed to participate under diplomatic immunity. As Ryan entered alongside the Imperial Dragon, a hush fell over the assembled dignitaries. He was acutely aware of the stares, some curious, some hostile, some calculating. His physical changes were subtle enough that he still appeared mostly human at first glance, but anyone looking closely could see the faint scaling pattern on his skin and the vertical pupils of his eyes. Commander Illiciter approached them, her expression grim. "Glad you made it back. The situation's deteriorated while you were gone. Corp Syndicate has been spreading rumors that the Dragon Imperium is planning to upgrade select humans as part of a domination strategy." "Preposterous," the Imperial Dragon replied. "The neurograph was performed solely to save this boy's life." "Truth matters less than perception in situations like this," Ter countered. "And right now, perception is working against us." The summit began with formal introductions and statements of position. The Imperial Dragon spoke eloquently about peaceful coexistence and the need for mutual respect between species. The human delegates expressed concerns about draconic technology being used on humans without broader oversight. The reformer representatives, maintaining a veneer of diplomatic courtesy, called for greater transparency and sharing of advanced technologies. When it was Ryan's turn to speak, he stood on legs that still occasionally trembled but now reliably supported his weight. "A few weeks ago, I was just a station errand boy," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I saw someone in danger, and I acted without thinking. That choice cost me the use of my limbs, but it also gave me something unexpected, a new perspective." He gestured to his altered appearance. I'm not fully human anymore, but I'm not a dragon either. I exist somewhere in between, and that's not a tragedy. It's an opportunity. For centuries, our species have maintained careful boundaries. But what if those boundaries are more permeable than we thought? What if we could be more together than we ever could separately? Murmurs rippled through the audience, but before any official responses could be made, the diplomatic hall security alarms activated. The massive doors sealed automatically as Commander Tear received an urgent communication. Armed intruders have breached the station's secondary docking bay, she announced, drawing her weapon. Security forces are engaging, but they're heavily outnumbered. The representatives erupted in panic and accusations. In the chaos, Ryan noticed several supposed reformer diplomats reaching inside their robes. With his enhanced senses, another gift of his transformation, he could hear the distinctive hum of energy weapons charging. "It's a trap!" he shouted, lunging toward the Imperial Dragon just as the false diplomats drew their weapons. What followed was chaos. Security forces engaged with the infiltrators as the legitimate delegates sought cover. The Imperial Dragon, now partially transformed, created a protective barrier with his armored wings, shielding several human diplomats from weapons fire. Ryan found himself face to face with one of the attackers, a human mercenary with Corp Syndicate augmentations visible beneath his skin. The man raised his weapon, aimed squarely at Ryan's chest. "Nothing personal, kid. You're just bad for business." Ryan reacted instinctively. The heat that had been building in his chest since his transformation surged forward, and he exhaled a concentrated jet of flame. Not the weak sparks from his practice sessions, but a focused stream hot enough to melt the barrel of the mercenary's weapon. The man dropped the superheated gun with a cry of pain and stumbled backward, shocked by the display. Ryan pressed his advantage, drawing on newly developed reflexes to disarm and subdue his attacker. Across the hall, the Imperial Dragon was engaged with multiple opponents, his movements a blur of scaled power. One attacker, more heavily armed than the others, fired a specialized weapon that penetrated the dragon's natural armor, drawing a roar of pain. Ryan saw the Imperial Dragon falter, momentarily vulnerable. Without hesitation, he launched himself across the room, placing his body between the dragon and a second shot, a mirror image of their first encounter, roles reversed. This time, however, Ryan's body was not entirely human. The blast struck his shoulder, burning through fabric but skittering across the scaled skin beneath with minimal damage. "Now we're even," Ryan gasped, the impact still painful despite his enhanced durability. The Imperial Dragon's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with determination. Together, they fought back to back until Commander Tear's reinforcements arrived to secure the hall. When the fighting ended and the wounded were being tended to, investigators discovered the true extent of the conspiracy. Data recovered from the attackers revealed that Corp Syndicate had been manipulating both sides, funding the reformers while simultaneously stoking fears among human governments about draconic expansion. They wanted war, Commander Tear explained during the debriefing. Conflict between humans and dragons would have created an unprecedented arms race, with Corp Syndicate positioned to profit by selling to both sides. In the days that followed, as delegates from both species worked to repair diplomatic relations, Ryan found himself increasingly acting as an informal intermediary. His unique perspective, part human, part dragon, allowed him to bridge cultural gaps that had previously seemed insurmountable. The Dragon Court, impressed by his conduct during the crisis, formally recognized him as the first dragon friend in centuries, a title once given to exceptional humans who had earned draconic trust. The Human Diplomatic Corps, somewhat more cautiously, appointed him as a special liaison to the Dragon Imperium. 1 month after the assassination attempt that had changed everything, Ryan stood on an observation deck of Aldrax 7, watching shuttles arrive for the signing of the new Human-Dragon Cooperation Treaty. His body had stabilized, the draconic changes neither advancing nor receding. He had adapted to his new abilities, enhanced strength, improved healing, limited fire breathing, and was learning to use them responsibly. The Imperial Dragon joined him at the viewport, now comfortable enough in Ryan's presence to maintain his natural draconic form rather than the humanoid appearance he adopted for most diplomatic functions. The treaty will be signed within the hour, the dragon announced. For the first time, it includes provisions for cultural exchange programs and selected technology sharing. And what about others like me? Ryan asked. Will there be more neural grafts? The dragon's expression grew thoughtful. Under strictly controlled circumstances, yes. The court has authorized a limited program for humans with catastrophic spinal injuries, similar to yours. Not a gift given lightly, but one we can no longer justify withholding when lives can be saved. Ryan nodded, watching the stars beyond the station. His old life as an overlooked errand boy seemed like a distant memory. Ahead lay uncharted territory, a role as living proof that the boundaries between species could be crossed, that differences could become strengths rather than barriers. You know, the Imperial Dragon said, breaking the contemplative silence. In draconic culture, there's an ancient saying, the most valuable treasures are not the ones we keep, but the ones we give away. That doesn't sound very much like the dragons from human stories, Ryan observed with a smile. Perhaps your stories have been missing the point. The dragon's golden eyes gleamed with amusement. The true power has never been in hoarding treasure, but in recognizing its proper use. They stood side by side, human-dragon hybrid and ancient cosmic being, watching vessels from across the galaxy converge on the station. A new chapter in interspecies relations was beginning. One neither of them could have predicted when a station errand boy impulsively stepped in front of an assassin's bullet. Next time, the Imperial Dragon said, try not to jump in front of plasma weapons so readily. Ryan laughed, the sound carrying hints of both human mirth and draconic rumble. Only when you're in danger, Grand Magister. The dragon made a sound suspiciously like a snort. That's precisely what concerns me. As they turned to make their way to the treaty signing, Ryan reflected that life rarely follows planned paths. Sometimes it takes a catastrophic detour, a split-second decision, a moment of selfless foolishness to reveal possibilities that had always existed, waiting just beyond the boundaries of the familiar. His was not the future he had imagined for himself, but standing on his own 2 feet, carrying the essence of 2 worlds within him, he found himself looking forward to whatever came next. The universe, after all, was full of boundaries waiting to be crossed.